Coming up, it's a busy day around the SEC, and it begins with breaking news involving Tennessee running back John Kelly. It's all on the way next on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello everyone, I'm Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. It's good to have you with us today on AT&T SEC Country Live. All the things that you've come to expect from our program will be here today, including our First and 10, taking a look at the topics we had planned on discussing on today's show. But Mike, before we have a chance to do any of that, we have to deal with another subject. It is big news for the league and unfortunately bad news if you're a fan of the Tennessee Vols.
Yeah, I mean, we were locked and loaded to go with the First and 10, and then all of a sudden this topic pops up about 45 minutes ago, so it's something we definitely need to address. It's another thing to pile on in Knoxville right now.
So let's deal with that. Mike Griffith writing about it at SECCountry.com, originally reported by Knoxville TV station WATE, that Tennessee running back John Kelly and Tennessee linebacker Will Ignont, one of the prized possessions from the Vols 2017 recruiting class, both arrested. Let me just make sure I get the wording here. I guess it's a citation for marijuana possession. I'll scroll down here to make sure I get the words exactly right. So Kelly cited for possession of a Schedule 6 drug. That's a misdemeanor. Not having a headlight, not having proof insurance. Ignont is a true freshman, cited for possession of drug paraphernalia, which is a misdemeanor. So this is big news, as Mike Griffith kind of leads off with, as his piece at SECCountry.com. This puts the status of Ignont, and probably more importantly, the running back John Kelly, their status very much in question for the game on Saturday against Kentucky. Let me just start with that. What do you make of all of this when it comes to the biggest name on the Tennessee roster?
Well, could the timing be worse? I mean, here it was. We were sitting here yesterday talking about his comments about the offensive line and how you have to block for the quarterback.
Yep.
Saying this is a guy, John Kelly, that really kind of sounds like a leader. Somebody maybe taking control of this team. And I think we even said verbatim, this is a guy who sounds like he has his head on straight. And I don't know that the timing could possibly be worse for Butch Jones and company. With all the news and about possibly firing him, then you have Rashawn Golden this past weekend who wants to flip the double birds against Alabama. Then you come in midweek. I mean, you can't even get past Tuesday night without having a couple of guys arrested for marijuana possession. And I mean, we're not going to sit here and play DEA. We're not going to sit here and break down, the drug laws in each different state. But it's a bad look. I don't care how you slice it. It's a bad look for this football team. It makes me think that there's not any leadership up there. If John Kelly's the guy that's speaking out and trying to be your leader, and then he gets arrested that night, I don't know how you spin this in a positive way.
What you're dealing with is just the reality of the situation, and it reminds me of kind of what I think about Butch Jones on this. I don't think you can draw a line and blame Butch Jones for John Kelly and Will Ignont being cited for the marijuana issue. I don't think you can draw a direct line and say, hey, it's Butch Jones' fault. Jones should have done better. These players should have known better, and you blame Butch Jones for that. I don't think you can draw a straight line on that. No. But in addition to saying that, I think this incident makes it more likely that Butch Jones loses his job, and not necessarily because the absence of Kelly would make it harder to beat Kentucky, although it would. I just think it's another negative headline, and at a certain point in time, the bow kind of breaks with negative headlines. I don't think you can blame Butch Jones, but Butch Jones will be blamed for this.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the one thing that pushed the AD up there, John Curry, over the edge. Then this has been decided long ago. I don't think this piles on it and shifts it one way or another. I think Butch Jones is going to be fired. I mean, I've made no bones about it the entire season. I don't see any reason to retain him. And I think this is just another black eye on this program for these fans and the supporters of this entire program to say, you know what, this just isn't a good direction. It's like I said, I don't know how you put a positive spin on it. John Kelly is sitting here, what is he, the 5th leading rusher in the SEC? He's basically one of the better offensive players they have coming from the season. And then he gets arrested, or I guess not arrested, or cited on Tuesday night.
I don't know enough about drugs to understand why this is funny, but I'm pretty sure this is funny. Aaron Egner in the comment section said, I guess Kentucky figured out a way to stop Tennessee's running game, put an 8th in the box. I don't quite know why that's funny, but I have a feeling there's a little bit of a drug pun involved with that, which is pretty funny there. We'll take some more comments on this as well. Lane Flynn says, I am shocked not. That's what he says about that. Joel Anthony Dean says they're going to slap on the wrist. Honestly, do we have to pretend like we're scandalized by this, though? And I know if you're not a Tennessee fan, you want to, jump on the table and pound both fists, look at the lawlessness of the Tennessee program. I frankly don't care if you think marijuana should be legalized or not. That's not really a subject for a show like this one. But what we do see is varying degrees of severity in terms of how the SEC handles this, varying degree of severity in terms of how states handle it, in terms of whether or not you even consider this a criminal act. So I'm not going to pretend like I need to see John Kelly and Will Ignont under the jail here to believe that justice is done. Is this inconsistent with Kelly, who on this show yesterday kind of sort of purported himself to be a little bit of a leader of the Tennessee team? To a certain degree, that's kind of true here. But I don't need, these guys to be flogged 30 lashes over an issue like this. I'm just not scandalized by that.
I'm with you, and it's like I said, we're not here to be the DEA. I'm not going to talk about what drug laws are different.
Although if we were, that would be awesome. DEA agent.
That's right. We'd be handing out the punishments.
I was a narc at my local high school, though.
Why am I not shocked by that? I don't know. It fits your personality so
true, but I looked like a narc. How about that?
Got the nerdy persona, the guy in there watching everybody else and narking everybody at the resource officer.
That's exactly right.
Anyways, like I said, we're not here to be DEA agents. All I'm saying is that from a Tennessee football perspective, it's a terrible look. And I mentioned to you this yesterday. This is John Kelly standing up and talking about his offensive line, talking about his wide receivers, talking about his offense. Hey, y'all need to get it together. This is the things you need to do to be successful. How could he possibly stand up back in front of these guys after this incident this week, through the stretch run of the season, and say, hey, oh, by the way, I'm still a leader. I'm still a guy that's going to show you how to do things on this football team. I think he's lost that ability. Now you're back to square one where maybe this found a leader. He's gone now.
Keith Mix in the comments section. I'm not even sure who he roots for, but I love his line. He says, it's about time it's somebody else besides us. And you want to talk about perfectly sort of symbolizing all SEC fans? Either the SEC teams who feel like they've been in too much trouble as of late, or the SEC teams just glad it's not them. Let this be Tennessee. Let this be somebody else besides us.
Yeah, no, I mean, that goes back to what I'm saying. This is a small deal. This is not like John Kelly got drug off in handcuffs. I mean, he was cited, he was released, they were able to go home. This is not like Baker Mayfield running from the cops or somebody, some of the situations we've had recently in college football. So I don't want to do that to him. I just want to talk about it in terms of where it lies with Butch Jones and his Tennessee program. And it's just, there's no way to spin it. Like I said, this is an awful look for this guy to be out on a Tuesday night with marijuana in his car and to get cited for this.
Given how John Kelly performed against Georgia, though, if he had tried to run from the cops, I'm not sure how far he'd have gotten.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one right there. Did you pick that one up out of the comment section or make that one?
No, I'm going to take credit for that one myself. All right, we'll have more on this, including your comments here on our show today. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live, even in the moments when I make corny jokes. And AT&T invites you right now to make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. AT&T. Good to have them with us on the program today. All right, let's dive into our 1st and 10 here with item number. What are you laughing about now?
BA and his dad jokes, man. They get me every time. It's like I keep thinking about it for 5 minutes and crack up.
All right, let's transition now to the program that's normally in trouble with the law during this portion of the show. That's the Florida Gators. They're the subject of item number 1 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. And the war of words, I guess, kind of continues between Florida and Georgia ahead of Saturday's game in Jacksonville. Most of the volatile stuff coming from Florida. Georgia not really returning fire on that very much. And for those of you who maybe not quite sure everything that's gone on here, let's kind of go back in time and kind of take a look at everything here. Let me start with Chauncey Gardner, the Florida defender, who a little early in the week took a look at Jake Fromm, the Georgia quarterback, ahead of Saturday's game, and Gardner apparently wasn't too impressed with what he saw from Fromm. Here's Gardner.
I mean, he said he has a great quarterback. I mean, I get it. He's throwing simple passes. I get it. Anybody can throw a slant. I get it. But, I mean, like I said, we're just playing football. If he's one of the best quarterbacks, like I said, so be it. But he has to play Saturday. We're going to see what his best attribute is. If he can beat us with his arm, whoop-de-doo. But we're not focused on what he can do, what he can't do. We're just going to go out there and focus on us and just play football. We've been doing, like I said, the past 3 to 4 weeks.
Not to be outdone by that was Florida wide receiver Josh Hammond, a guy that has even failed to record a catch in 3 games this season, but still nonetheless says when he looks at the seniors on his team that have never lost to Georgia, it's just a reminder to him that dogs may be number 3, but that doesn't mean they're winning in Jacksonville on Saturday. Here's Hammond.
That mentality that they bring, being that they've never lost to Georgia, definitely brings a lot of confidence to us, just knowing that Georgia isn't a team that we lose to. So I think that's the message in the locker room right now, that they might be the number 3 team in the country, but they can't beat Florida.
So you may be curious at this point, what's the Georgia response to all this going to be? How are Georgia players going to respond to what the Florida players had to say? Well, on Tuesday evening, we had a chance to hear from some Georgia players, including Georgia safety J.R. Reed. Now, Reed, not a lifelong SEC player, transferred to Georgia from Tulsa. But he knows enough about the Gators to say what you heard from Gardner and Hammond is sort of par for the course when it comes to Jim McElwain's team. Here's J.R. Reed.
How do you look at that type of behavior? I mean, that's Florida, so that's what you expect for some teams. Some teams you don't expect it, but it doesn't bother me that much.
You do expect it from Florida?
Nah, it's just trash talk. It's no big deal.
So there, it's kind of funny at the end. You hear a reporter ask Reed, "So this is what you expect from Florida?" In other words, is this going to turn into its own bulletin board material? And Reed's smart enough to kind of sidestep that again. But there is an element of this that's true. That this is the kind of thing that Florida has been very comfortable doing, including Greg Steele in the comment section referencing last year's Tennessee game. We've talked about the game before Michigan this year.
Yeah.
Florida uses this stuff as motivation, whether you like it or not, whether it works or not. This is sort of the tack that they take.
Well, listen, in hearing all those interviews and those sound clips from all those guys, to me, what this entire situation tells me is that Kirby's message is being heard by his players. And you can thank the returning seniors, and you can thank Lorenzo Carter and Nick Chubb and some of those other guys, Roquan Smith. You can thank those guys. We talked about the leadership council a little bit that Kirby started to establish, and you're starting to get leaders come out of that. The senior leadership coming back from last year, not going to the NFL. This is what you get. You get a senior-laden team that has a bunch of upperclassmen that all have the same goal, and all of a sudden you start all saying the same things. You start understanding what how big the moment is, and start not trying to get too far away from what your team's message is moving forward. I think that Kirby Smart's message has been heard loud and clear. I think it's a big deal that they've been able to kind of stay away from this trash talk, because I think it would be easy as the number 3 team in the country going up against your rival that is in a down year right now to go in front of that camera and say, you know what, I don't care what they say, we're about to beat the brakes off of them. That's not what you hear out of Georgia right now, and I think it's a good look for that team.
You mentioned Lorenzo Carter, another guy that kind of responded to this yesterday, the senior outside linebacker, and he kind of gave Florida a bit of a pass, saying, listen, this is not just the Gators, this is sort of all rivalry games. Here's Lorenzo Carter.
It's a rivalry. You don't expect anything less. There's going to be a lot of trash talking out on the field too, but as long as we just keep going out there and playing football the way we've been playing, play physical and fast, I mean, all that stuff is going to take care of itself.
I mean, there's an element for me, though, on what Carter says there that's sort of letting Florida off too easy for some of this. Because, we referenced the Tennessee game last year where they talked about a duck can't pull a truck. That's what Quincy Wilson said. The fact of the matter is, Florida lost that game. The Michigan game where Mark Thompson said he was looking forward to seeing Florida beat the brakes off Michigan, they lost that game. The homecoming game against LSU this year, almost sort of an institutional version of trash talk. Florida lost that game too. There's an element in which Florida, to me, is almost becoming like the LeVar Ball of the SEC. The bravado, the trash talk, is, at least as of late, doesn't have a lot of connection in any sort of real-world fact.
Well, I think there's a little bit more connection than LeVar Ball has, because LeVar Ball's not on the court. He's just a guy that's sitting off to the side saying, oh, you know what, this is what my son's going to do. My son could be. These guys are actually on the field, which I think makes it a little bit more interesting when you really think about it. These are guys that are watching film, that are watching Jake Fromm, that are watching the number 3 team in the country, and they still seem to feel this way about how this rivalry matches up. I think it gives you a little bit more attitude if you're Georgia. And listen, I know what Lorenzo Carter said, and I just gave them kudos for not saying it against the camera, but I guarantee you, in the locker room, in these player-only meetings, in this leadership council in front of Kirby Smart, this is being talked about. This is talking about getting over that hump, and the fact of the matter is that Georgia does have to get over the Florida hump. They do have to probably prove to themselves that they can go down to Jacksonville and handle business. I think this is one of those stepping stone games for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve Howell in the comment section says he's a huge Gator fan, but I'm not looking forward to this game. UJ looks great this year. Fromm looks good, and they got a ton of great backs. I'm not worried about the first half. I'm worried about the second half when our defense starts to slow down. All 4 backs are still fresh and rolling, ready for the game. And I guess that is, in a lot of ways, the game plan that Georgia's probably looking to do here, which is lean on Florida. You could see a game that's close through 3 quarters, but maybe it's not until the 4th quarter that Georgia emerges, if it emerges at all.
Well, listen, I think if Jim McElwain could craft his football team, I think it would look a lot like Georgia's right now. I think you'd have that running game. You'd have the 3 or 4-headed monster at running back. Your offensive line would be playing with leverage. What we were promised from Jim McElwain at the start of the season, your offensive line's improved, playing with leverage, and you're not asking Felipe Franks to do a ton, because I don't think Georgia's asking Jake Fromm to do a ton. He's not carrying the football team, the running game is. That's how Jim McElwain would craft his attack. He just doesn't have the offensive line right now. And I don't know if you're going to blame him. I don't know if you blame the offensive line coach, but there's been a lack of development up front for them. So I think as that game wears on, you will start to see Georgia's offensive line lean on this defensive front from the Gators. They're going to have to try some way, somehow, to find some turnovers and find some magic on special teams if they want to be in this game late, and that's how they keep their energy going.
Joel Anthony Dean, a Florida fan's got every right to ask what he asked right here. Hey, what's Georgia's record against Florida since Georgia won the national championship? Well, in the 80s, Georgia was doing just fine against Florida, and we're going to talk more about this later on the show. That 1990 season is really the line of demarcation for this series, and it's one of the reasons why you hear Florida players confident, a lot of Florida fans confident. When Steve Spurrier took this job in 1990, everything changed. The last 30 years, you're talking about, heavily dominated by the Florida Gators, and every Georgia fan even has to admit that.
I saw this record, and I think it's the last 27 years, so that would go back to when you're talking about. 6-21, I believe the series is in the last 20 years since 1990. So that does kind of tell you the story of where things sit. And that's kind of why I say this might be a stepping stone for Kirby Smart in his tenure at Georgia. Hey, you know what? We feel like we're really good this year. We feel like we should be able to beat Florida. So go in and handle business. Use this game as a stepping stone and get over that mental hurdle, and this will just be another step on your way to becoming the program you want to.
Item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list involves the Auburn Tigers, a team that does not play on Saturday, but after a win, and a convincing one against Arkansas last Saturday, starting to look around and say, hey, are we still involved in this situation? Can we still be a contender in the SEC West? We talked about that yesterday. Yeah. They've got home games left against Georgia and Alabama. Those are certainly the kinds of games you can make some noise with. Also a tough date with Texas A&M kind of squeezed in there as well. Well, on the SEC Network this week, Marcus Spears, the former LSU player, current SEC Network analyst, said when he looks at Auburn, he still sees a team that can make some noise in the SEC West. Let me let you hear this from him, and let's see if we agree.
When you look at Auburn before the LSU game, we were talking about this team on the ascend. They started to kind of get comfortable with this offense. It looked like things were settling down for Jarrett Stidham. Chip Lindsey looked like he was at the helm of this offense. So I think now, with this infusion of both of these guys being healthy, they can kind of get back to what makes them successful offensively. The defense had a bad second half against LSU. They gave up some plays. But for the most part, I think Auburn is still a contender.
So when you listen to what Marcus Spears says there, one of the reasons why I wanted to play that audio clip on today's show is I think it's very much sort of encapsulates the conversation you hear around Auburn right now, and some of this happening around LSU as well, but it seems sort of like a prisoner of the moment type situation. And I'm saying this is a guy that was kind of on Auburn before the beginning of the season. And I still think Auburn can be a good team. But are we going to ride this roller coaster every time Auburn wins and loses of, hey, this team's terrible, Gus Malzahn ought to be fired, Chip Lindsey doesn't have full control over the offense, all of a sudden they beat Arkansas, who is literally the worst team in the SEC. Yes. I mean, they're right there in the conversation with Missouri or anybody else you want to put down there in that discussion. And all of a sudden now the SEC network's going to say, hey, Auburn's a contender again. I mean, there's a part of this that sort of feels like that's just a little too volatile and a little too violent one way or another in terms of the opinions.
Well, I think the reason they come to that opinion, I think Marcus Spears, and listen, we've both had that opinion on the show about Auburn kind of bouncing back from the loss against Clemson, really starting to take form. I think the reason you have that argument or that you feel that way is because they really have a good roster. I mean, they've got a good team. Yeah. They've got a good quarterback, running game, defense. I mean, you name it, it's well-rounded and they do a lot of good things. It's the coaching staff that you ask questions about, and it's the offensive philosophy. So I think that when you look at them from top to bottom, specifically on offense, you say, you know what? This is a team that can go out and beat anybody. If they're playing at the top of their game and Jarrett Stidham is being as efficient as he needs to be, yes, they could go out and beat Georgia. Yes, they can go out and beat Alabama. But we haven't seen that consistency. But I will say this, the minute I try to write Auburn off in my own thoughts, because I'm reading and I'm thinking about this before the show goes on, I had to think back to 2013. This is a team that lost to LSU, who had not played Clemson that year like they had this year, but had lost to LSU. And then all of a sudden they find magic down the stretch. They beat Georgia. They find a way to beat Alabama on the pick six. They beat Missouri in the SEC championship game and lose by a touchdown to Florida State. And I think that they have that team that has that ability to catch magic. I think they've got all the players in the world. They just had to figure out what they are. You finally have Cam Petaway and Kerryon Johnson both healthy at the same time, but now 3 offensive linemen that are hurt. Casey Dunn and some of those other guys up front. So figure out what you are and try to stick to your staples.
Hard to duplicate 2013 because you used the word magic. There's a lot of magic in that season. It's not just the play against Georgia where the ball flies right into the hands of the receiver, and obviously the kick six against Alabama. It's a lot of those close wins that you just can't count on in any given year. And for me, one of the reasons that I've actually been disappointed in what I've seen from Auburn, given the fact that I thought they'd be pretty good at the start of the year, is I thought that Gus Malzahn was going to be true to his word, that he's a CEO-style head coach, and this is Chip Lindsey's offense. And, I'm getting so tired of the press conference of Malzahn where it's the mincing of words of, this is Chip Lindsey's offense. He's getting to call the plays. But is he getting to choose the plays? I mean, or is this the kind of thing where you've sort of pre-decided what he's allowed to run, and in a way you're sort of describing an area in which Lindsey has autonomy when he actually does it. When I watch Auburn on the field, I have a hard time believing that Gus Malzahn's DNA isn't still in this offensive play calling, and that's why this Auburn team's not as good as I thought they would be.
Right, and I think when you look at that second half against LSU, that seemed to me like it was all Gus Malzahn. And listen, I think Chip Lindsey's still a good offensive coordinator. I think that he's having to kind of pick for maybe a group of plays that Gus Malzahn's handing him. Hey, you know what? We have a big lead. Let's run this play or this play in the second half, and they're both plays up the middle in the A and B gap. There's no magic. There's no, hey, let's throw this. Let's get 5-yard chunks on this kind of hook pattern, or let's throw it across the middle in these intermediate routes. You don't have that. It was, second half against LSU, it was taking a shot down the field, or it was hey, we're going to run the ball in the A and B gaps. And so That leads me to believe that Gus Malzahn is saying, yes, you can call the plays, but it has to be one of these 5 plays. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I felt like we got from Auburn and LSU in the second half. And that's why I think I still believe in Auburn. When I look at Auburn's schedule, when I look at what they're going to have to finish with, playing Georgia, playing Alabama, the path is there. And they do have a lot of talent on this team. And if they keep their foot on their opponent's throat sometimes, they'd probably be a lot more successful in the long run.
Bobby J. Smith, I'll run through a lot of comments here. He says, they are not there, talking about Auburn. Give it up, BA. You can say that you were wrong about Auburn. Listen, here's the thing about Alabama fans, and Bobby's a great Alabama fan in our comment section every day. Auburn may not win the SEC West, but you are kidding yourselves as an Alabama fan, an A&M fan, a Georgia fan, anybody left in the Auburn schedule. Nobody views Auburn as an easy game. Now, I'll criticize Malzahn for his sort of micromanaging the offense. I think that's going on. But there is nobody out there that still views Auburn as an easy game, including Alabama at the end of the season, by the way.
From all the Alabama fans I've talked to feel the same way I do. That it's a very dangerous game. Anytime you go in and play the Iron Bowl, especially when you're going down to Auburn, if you're an Alabama team, it's dangerous. I mean, it's Alabama has had their way for some games in this Nick Saban era, but I think it's sitting there, 3-7 or something like that, for Auburn against Alabama in the last 10 years since Nick Saban's been there. So it's not slam dunk. You don't just say, well, Nick Saban, this is, they've had this 10-year run and it's a dynasty. Auburn's had their moments too, and so I think you have to give credit to that and understand that it is going to be a tough game when you go down there.
Jimmy Barnes says they can't even beat a team that lost to Troy. Michael Cooper says about Malzahn and the sort of restlessness of some of the fans, stop firing coaches. This is how the SEC lost its dominant status. I don't know about the SEC overall, but in Auburn's case, I mean, it is kind of funny. Tommy Tuberville has an undefeated season in 2004. Within a couple of years, he's gone.
Right.
Gene Chizik wins a national championship. Within a couple of years, he's gone. Even go back to the 90s, early 90s, when Terry Biden has an undefeated season in 93. Within a couple seasons, he's gone. I mean, nobody gets tired of coaches quicker than Auburn.
No, they don't. And you think about some of the coaches. Gene Chizik had a national championship, was fired. Les Miles had a national championship, was fired. Mark Richt was a great coach, a long-tenured coach, and was fired. And I'm never going to blame these programs for moving on from some of the coaches they've had. If they want to reach for a high level, then I'm all for it. But what I will blame them for is making bad hires afterwards. You're moving on from some of these guys, and it's it's the recycled coaches. It's and I'm not going to bury Ed Orgeron. I think Kirby Smart has been a great hire, but go out and find somebody that's been proven at this level. Go out and find that proven Power 5 guy. And if we're the SEC, if we're the almighty SEC, and we have the pocketbooks to be able to do this, then open them up. Pay these guys. Open up $8 and $9 million to pay these coaches per year, because I guarantee you that's what your fan bases want.
Bo Molinari says BA said it. Bo's a big A&M fan. Texas A&M is going to tell you a lot about Auburn going forward, and I do think that's true. We'll talk about the Aggies later on in the show, but I do think that you'll focus on those November games against Georgia and against Alabama. I think that A&M game is really big for Auburn.
I agree. That could possibly be a trap game, because A&M's not any pushover either. And you look at A&M and LSU and Auburn, all still with one loss in conference play. All three of those teams could be dangerous down the stretch.
Boy, a lot of comments coming in here on Auburn. Wish we had time for all of these, but a lot of good stuff coming in. For now, though, let me move on and do item number 3 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10. Of course, we started the show by talking about the marijuana citation for Tennessee running back John Kelly. In the car with him was a former four-star linebacker and freshman Will Ignont. That kind of puts, I think, more pressure on Butch Jones and kind of where his career goes from here at the University of Tennessee. And you're starting to see more evidence out there in the world of the media and kind of the reaction of fans that, man, it's just going to be really hard for Butch to save his job here. Let me give you a couple of examples. First of all, this picture shows up on social media of like a high school there in Tennessee, Brentwood High School. This is like the official sign in the front of the school. Normally it tells you when like yearbook pictures are. Out in front of Brentwood High School, I'm assuming this is authentic, it says Fire Butch Jones right there in front of the very posh neighborhood near Nashville of Brentwood High School. Not to be outdone by that. Take a look at what somebody captured on Twitter of a segment on Fox News. Now this is a little bit of politics. Kind of push past that to get to the gal just sort of dropping a Fire Butch Jones right there on national cable news. Did you see this from earlier this week?
Last question here. This is a very, very charged question. Who is more popular here in Tennessee these days? Senator Bob Corker or your UT football coach, Butch Jones?
Oh, no. That's rough. Gruden or Kelly, that's where I stand. Fire Butch.
Wow.
I mean, so listen, and by the way, at Sugarval on Twitter is one that had that for us. But when you hear, Fire Butch Jones on Fox News, when you see Brentwood High School, you made mention of a sign flying over Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah.
Is there a point in which the Fire Butch Jones message, it's so easy to say, it's 3 syllables, Fire Butch Jones. I mean, that phrase has almost gone viral. And once that phrase goes viral, Can a Kentucky win save you at that point?
Honestly, this reminds me of a scenario that was happening when I was coming out of high school and I was being recruited. This is the first time I remember anything going viral in terms of firing coaches. It was Fire Ron Zook. You remember FireRonZook.com?
Yeah, FireRonZook.com.
The Florida people
also 3 syllables.
Yeah, also
Ron
3 syllables.
Zook.
And it became a thing. It was like everybody in Florida wanted to talk about Fire Ron Zook and FireRonZook.com, and everybody wanted Ron Zook out of that place. And guess what? He did get fired. I mean, I like Ron Zook. He recruited me to Florida. He was a guy that I thought was a good coach, but had to move on because he was not winning at the place he was. And it does remind me of Butch Jones' tenure, where he's a likable guy, but he's not getting it done on the field. And I think you see that entire state. It's not just Knoxville and it's not just UT. It's the entire state that's kind of encompassing this entire argument, saying, get this guy out of here.
Lance Cotner, by the way, in the comment section, very proud to call himself an alumnus of Brentwood High School. He likes the message coming from Brentwood on that. And it just becomes the kind of thing that Butch Jones, can't overcome. And you put yourself back in the position of John Currie on this of, what are you hoping for? What are you waiting for? Because I don't know if Tennessee's just not aware of how the early signing period is going to change college football, but you can't make this move right at the last moment, then spend 2 weeks essentially trying to pull a 2018 class together. I mean, you could have as many as 80% of these guys sign in that 3-day period during December. And if Tennessee either is trying to hold on to Butch Jones, they're not holding on to these recruits, or if they're going to try to quickly sell the next generation of all players on a new coach, that's not a lot of time to be able to do that.
No, and the only thing I can put together, by the way, did you notice how in tune that girl was when she said, hey, I'm on the Kelly and Gruden bandwagon, fire Butch Jones, get him out of here.
Oh, that's right. I didn't catch that part, but she's right, yeah.
She was very in tune with who the coaching search is actually looking at. I think that's funny. I think it's interesting when you see fans that are that in tune before the other coaches even left the office. You know what I mean? And so I think there's 2 ways of looking at this, why Butch Jones is still in his position as head coach at Tennessee. I think if you wait till the end of the season, if they don't go to a bowl game, then you can look at it and say, you know what, we're going to pay him less of a buyout because he didn't go to a bowl game. And then I think if he does go to a bowl game, then you wait till after December 20th, which, by the way, I hate. If that's what John Currie's doing, I absolutely hate that you're going to try to wait till after that first signing day to possibly get rid of Butch Jones. I think that's a bad move if that's what he's doing.
I think that they would be so universally panned for that.
Oh, my God.
I just think that there's no way you'd be able to do that. Their name would be mud on the recruiting trail going forward. Now, I don't even know at this point if recruits want to play for Butch Jones, but if they try to sell to the early signing period guys that Jones is our guy, we then make the move after a bowl game to save some money, they'd be absolutely
well. Listen, but I think they have to be extremely careful. I don't mind that he's taking his time. And first of all, I thought Butch Jones was going to be fired on Sunday. He wasn't. So looking at it now and try to observe what's going on right now, I don't mind that they're taking their time if they have a plan. Mm-hmm. If John Currie's coming to the office every day and say, you know what, I'm going to contact this guy, I'm going to talk to this agent, I'm going to put feelers out on this head coach, and Butch Jones is still there kind of coaching the team, then I don't mind that. I think they have to have a direction. I think this has to be an extremely calculated hire if you're Tennessee, because I really don't think if this is a bad hire, I think you have such a long road back to being a really big difference maker in the SEC.
Chuck Crocker, sort of referencing a lot of other SEC fans, he's a Alabama fan. He says, keep Butch Jones, give him a raise and a contract extension. I know a lot of Alabama fans, Georgia fans, Florida fans, a lot of SEC fans feel that way.
We've seen it a couple of weeks in a row. I think South Carolina fans had the Keep Butch Jones shirts. I saw some in Alabama last weekend in Tuscaloosa. And I think that's a trend you're going to see continue. I remember that happening with Gene Chizik at Auburn back in the day, and they ended up getting rid of him too. So.
Interesting comment from David Melton, and this is a very fair thing to bring up. He says, most likely Jones won't be fired this year at all. The media is not the AD. And David, I get you on that sometimes the media is in a hurry to sort of proclaim things as they have to happen. Why hasn't it happened already? And maybe the AD, John Currie's operating on a different timeline. But this is one of those moments when I don't think the media, me included here, I don't think we're exaggerating or sensationalizing the situation. I mean, if you're a Tennessee fan, you can look at the state of this 2018 class. I got news for you. Some of the guys, if you go to the major recruiting websites and look at people who call themselves Tennessee commits, the word's out on the street, those guys are not going to Tennessee. I mean, that's just the biggest open secret in the world. And if you want to start rattling off these names, we can start rattling off these names of guys who have already kicked the balls to the curb and just haven't announced it publicly yet. I mean, at a certain point in time, if you want players in your future program, you got to get a coach that players want to play for.
I completely agree. And here's what how I feel about kind of the media that's been talking about Butch Jones. I think the media has to write about what the pulse of the fan is.
That's true.
I think
that's so true.
Everybody's talking about firing Butch Jones. You just saw it on Fox News. I mean, that's somebody that's completely just off the street talking on Fox News about fire Butch Jones. So I know the media is talking about it a lot, but I think there's a reason behind that. I think that's what they're hearing from a lot of the fan base. And I know that Butch still has his backing, but To me, his opportunity was last year. You know, you had Josh Dobbs, you had Derek Barnett, you had everything in place to make a run. You beat Florida and you beat Georgia, and somehow you still can't pull off the SEC East. And so to me, that was kind of the grave marker for Butch Jones' tenure.
Mike Johnson, I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV, and they'll keep you connected all season long. Let me keep this theme at least going on as we move on to item number 4 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Chris Lowe, pretty good college football writer for ESPN.com, is on with Bo Mattingly. That's a sports talk show out in the state of Arkansas. And Lowe, I'm assuming kind of riffing here and just sort of talking, but he dropped a number that I thought was really kind of interesting, and I guess I'm curious to sort of see if you agree with this. So Lowe on the Bo Mattingly show says, it wouldn't be idiotic to think there will be 6 open jobs in the SEC this offseason. Now, let's do the math on this for a moment. If we're going to get to 6, you got to include Butch Jones. I'm assuming you're including Brett Bielema there. Ole Miss is going to be in there because I can't imagine Luke's coming back. Barry Odom is probably in there.
I've got this in different stages, so I'm interested to see what you think of this.
So there's 2 left.
Okay.
And at this point in time, you're getting into sort of a hot button deal. You're getting into a McElwain leaving of his own accord.
Yeah.
You're getting into a Gus Malzahn moving on. I know that's a subject that you and I have kind of kicked around a little bit off the air about it. Is this a guy that just sort of gets tired of the pressure at Auburn and the dissatisfaction of fans? But you can't get to 6 unless a Malzahn or a McElwain's included in that group, can you?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Here's how I kind of broke it down in 4 different layers. First of all, I think there's 6 coaches that are completely safe. That'll be fine. I got that: Saban, Muschamp, Smart, Stoops, Mullen, and Mason. I think those 6 are, they're locked in for next year. Then I think you have 8 that you could possibly throw in this fire. I've got definite firings as Tennessee and Ole Miss. I think that both of those guys, both of those programs are.
Come on, poor Matt Luke's not going to get fired. He's not going to.
Well, they're just not going to renew him. So both of those programs are going to be looking for a head coach next year, right?
Right, yeah.
So my next ones are maybes. I think you got Barry Odom and Brett Bielema in the maybe list. I think that's 4 right there. Long shots to me: Jim McElwain at Florida and Texas A&M with Kevin Sumlin. I think that those are kind of long shots. And then guys that I think have actually rescued their job this year: Gus Malzahn and Ed Orgeron so far. I really think that you can kind of interchange some of those last 4.
Can't put my boy Sumlin in the rescued his job?
Not yet. Not yet. I think when you look down the rest of that docket, if they have this similar season, that's what his downfall has been. He can get to 8 and 5. He can.
Wait, what's their record right now?
They're 6-2 is their record right now. Still playing Auburn. Still playing a couple other teams.
You can't let him keep it. He lose one more time, get to 9-3. You can't let him keep his job for 9-3.
Maybe, but I mean that's yet to be proven on the field. Texas A&M has already said, their AD came out and said, this is a guy who has to get over the hump, and we have to be better than we have been. 8 and 5 is what they have been, and it's not ruled out that they won't go 8 and 5 again.
Y'all trash me in this comment section every day. Even today, I don't even know what I've done to half of y'all. You're trashing the comment section. Mike Johnson's trying to fire Kevin Sumlin for 9-3.
Well, I mean, he hasn't proven to me that he's going to go 9-3. I look at their schedule and I look at what's on down the road for them, and yes, it's very doable, and you don't see these teams really jumping up, but you still have Mississippi State, Auburn, Ole Miss, LSU, mixed in with New Mexico. I mean, any of those 4 teams could jump up and beat them.
Yeah,
aside from maybe
Texas A&M is going to be a fun game. We're going to talk more about that actually in just a moment. Let me move on now, though, to item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And by the way, coming up in just a moment, we mentioned the change in the Georgia-Florida rivalry, the year that actually happened. We'll take a good look at that coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, let's do item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So I did this exactly for you because I knew this would kind of get your blood boiling just a little bit. So, national radio host Colin Cowherd, who is, at this point in time, just a real big, I think, anti-Alabama guy. He sort of made that part of his shtick. I don't know if this has been going on for a long time, but it's certainly a part of his shtick right now. Well, he's on a show this week, and he's kind of projecting ahead to a national championship. Well, there's a team from the Big Ten that he really likes a lot more than Alabama. I believe we have this for you. Can we hear a little bit from Colin Cowherd here and the team that he thinks is going to take care of Alabama? Here's Colin.
I'll say it again. I picked Ohio State to win the national championship. I think they're going to beat Penn State by 7 to 10 points. And I think they're going to end up in the championship game. And I think they're probably going to end up against Alabama. And I think they're going to house them. I really do. I think they're going to I don't think Alabama's going to move the ball on Ohio State. I don't.
So here's my thing on this. I don't mind saying that Ohio State's the favorite to win the national championship. I don't necessarily agree with that. But I would have Ohio State on my short list of teams that could win the national championship. Yeah. So I don't fault that opinion, and I don't fault him saying that Ohio State's going to beat Alabama, even though you're adding in they're going to house them. Alabama's going to be able to move the football. That seems to be sort of overly sensationalized, and take it from a guy that has a tendency to sort of do something on his own. I kind of know one when I see one, and I sort of feel like I see one there with Colin Cowherd. But the real point here, though, is Cowherd's doing a national radio show for a national audience. him banging on Alabama in that way just gives you an indication that the rest of the country's tired of Alabama and they want someone different. Even an unlikable coach like Urban Meyer and a mostly hated program like Ohio State, the neutral observer in the country will take that bunch over Alabama. It shows you the uphill climb that Alabama has from a perception standpoint right now.
I agree with you. And listen, as sick as the rest of the country might be about Alabama, that's how sick I am of Colin Cowherd. I mean, this guy is completely jumped the shark for me. It just, by the way, Alabama getting housed by Ohio State. Nick Saban in his tenure at Alabama has never lost by more than 14 points. So I don't know what getting housed is. I've always said that's the difference between Nick Saban and Urban Meyer. Nick Saban never has the games like last year Ohio State did in the playoff where they get beat 31-0. It doesn't happen when Nick Saban at Alabama. Their defense has been too strong. And listen, I understand his point. I think there's a path for Ohio State to jump back in this. They did get beat handily by Oklahoma, who in turn then lost to Iowa State. But I mean, if we're going to sit here and poke holes in Alabama's schedule all day yesterday, and Greg McElroy comes on and says they haven't really played anybody, Florida State doesn't look that great, please, by all means, look at Ohio State's schedule and tell me who it is they've beaten. I've got Indiana, Army, UNLV, Rutgers, Maryland, and Nebraska. I mean, is that a murderer's row? Is that for somebody for Colin Cowherd to come out and say they're going to house Bama because they've been housing these other teams? I understand it, and I understand that where you might be getting tired of Alabama, and maybe Ohio State does find a way because Lord knows they did it a couple years ago in the Sugar Bowl in 2014 against Alabama. But to go on there and say that they're going to house Alabama based on what you've seen from both these teams this year, I think is laughable. It makes me so mad to see Colin Cowherd continue to kind of get these headlines by coming on TV and saying dumb things. This guy goes from talking about LeBron to Floyd Mayweather to Alabama and goes on down the list, and I don't know how he knows that much about everything. It's ridiculous to me.
Bobby J. Smith in the comment section says, tired of Alabama, but who cares? SEC, knock us off. So here's the thing, Bobby. I understand where you're coming from, but this notion that Alabama fully controls its own destiny, I don't know if that's true for anybody in college football right now. Yes, if Alabama goes undefeated, they're going to have no problem getting the college football playoff, you'd think, because of the faltering of the Pac-12 and maybe the other leagues. But, you know, let's not forget, right now you've got a Notre Dame team that's kind of knocking on the door here that's going to push a conference champion out of the playoff. We already know at least one conference is going to be excluded. There's a scenario here in which Alabama maybe doesn't win the SEC. Maybe Georgia wins the SEC. Now, undefeated Georgia takes what we think of as the de facto SEC spot, and now Alabama's a one-loss team trying to get in the playoff. The college football playoff selection committee is made up of human beings. You're going to tell me that human beings aren't at least somewhat influenced by guys what Colin Cowherd say, and Cowherd wouldn't be saying it if he didn't think a lot of his audience already agreed with it. I mean, these guys and gals that run this college football playoff selection committee, they're essentially just politicians. They put their finger in the air, they decide which way the wind's blowing, and to a lot of people, the wind's blowing against Alabama at the moment.
Well, and I think this college football playoff selection committee, other than just feeling the temperature of the fandom, I think that they want good matchups. And I think they want fans that'll travel. If you're going to put a semifinal game out in Pasadena, California, then you're not going to pick some small school that's not going to travel out there. And I don't think there's any small schools involved this year that might be able to make that trip. But you're going to pick a team like Alabama that can play a team like TCU or vice versa. And I think that's a big important sticking part where Alabama just has to focus on winning. And that's why I don't ever mind, hey, rank them first, rank them second, third, fourth. All they have to do is just keep winning games and everything else will take care of itself.
I like this comment from Jeremy Pettis who says, I hope Bama gets to play Ohio State in a rematch. Bama wants Ohio State. Bring it. I actually like that from Jeremy. It's referencing back the 2014 game, a game that Ohio State did win. And for now, the Buckeyes have some bragging rights. But that's a guy in Jeremy who says, hey, let me get that rematch. You know, rematch against Clemson, like to see that. Rematch against Ohio State, like to see that as well.
All I can say about that is I hope that's not in New Orleans at Sugar Bowl, because Bama under Nick Saban has not been very good in the Sugar Bowl down in New Orleans. So I would hate to see that matchup start to take place again where Bama has to go down and play Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl. But I'm okay with saying that maybe Ohio State would beat Bama. I understand that. They've got good players. They've got, top 5, top 3 talent. I just think the way Colin Cowherd, he comes out and says they're going to house Bama in the national championship game, what are you seeing that tells you that? They lost to Oklahoma, and every other game has been a wash.
I love getting this guy stirred up with that. Whatever happens between Alabama and Ohio State is going to be in the future. We'll obviously talk about it in the future. But for now, let's get ready to look back to the past in a special season for Gators fans. One in which Steve Spurrier took the helm as the head ball coach, and Florida never looked back. It was a unique time for the SEC, and it's the subject of this week's Tony Chachere's Seasons to Remember.
Tony Chachere's presents Seasons to Remember, and a look back at 1990. An appropriate year to remember given this Saturday's renewal of the rivalry known as the world's largest outdoor cocktail party between Georgia and Florida. The Bulldogs and Gators series has been defined by two distinctly different eras, a period dominated by UGA and the heyday for Florida, which began in 1990 with the hiring of Steve Spurrier. Spurrier made beating Georgia one of the program's top goals, and the Gators still feed off that ideal today. Elsewhere in the SEC, Tennessee coach Johnny Majors led the Vols to the conference championship and a Sugar Bowl victory against Virginia in 1990 and ended a streak of 3 consecutive SEC championships for Pat Dye and Auburn. The SEC also made history in 1990 when it ushered in the era of conference expansion, when it added Arkansas and South Carolina as the 11th and 12th members of the league, setting the league toward a path that would make it the biggest and best conference in college football, a journey that began in 1990, a season to remember.
And Seasons to Remember here on AT&T SEC Country Live is brought to you by Tony Sacheries. And if you're looking to spice up your next tailgate, look no further than Tony Sacheries. Tailgate champions since 1972. Tony Sacheries makes everything taste great. I bet a young whippersnapper like you doesn't even remember 1990. But for me, that's like in the heart of the time I was becoming a big college football fan. Now, I'll tell you, Georgia was terrible in 1990. That was not a good season for the Dogs, the team that I was following growing up. But nonetheless, that was a good time to sort of acquaint myself with college football. I was becoming a pretty big fan.
By the way, I love that solo shot of you, man. Every time you get a chance to glisten on that screen, I mean, this guy was made for television and camera, wasn't he?
Don't do that. I don't. Listen, we'll go back and forth in the football stuff. I don't ever make fun of your personal appearance. You're making fun of my.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying it looks great.
I can't help how fat my face is.
It looks great, man. It looks great. I was 3 years old in 1990. By the way, if that helps you out with it, any thought that I might, any thought that I might remember the 1990 season. That was a 10 team league at the time, right in the SEC.
10-team league.
That was before the expansion.
How about this? They only played a 6-game conference schedule.
Oh, God.
So it's a very different SEC, but Arkansas and South Carolina they were voted to allow in the league then. I guess they started playing in the league in 1992, 91, 92.
I think it was 92. Yeah.
But that's when it happened, and that's the reason why we look back on the day with our Tony Sacheries seasons to remember. Speaking of the Florida Gators, by the way, the team that's kind of the subject of that, let's also make them the subject item number 6 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So there's been kind of an interesting thing going on with Florida as of late. Obviously, there was the weird death threat stuff we talked about on the show yesterday. McElwain had to kind of follow back up on that today in the SEC coaches teleconference, and he didn't really provide many more details on this kind of a strange thing, and it just sort of speaks to what would almost appear to be a rift right now between McElwain and his employer at Florida. We don't know that for sure, but there's some evidence that suggests that. In fact, CBS Sports college football writer Dennis Dodd was on a recent sports radio show interview, and he kind of sort of guessed out loud, sort of hypothesized, hey, maybe McElwain's not going to worry about Florida getting tired of him. Maybe he's getting tired of Florida. Here's what Dodd said in the interview.
But what about Jim McElwain, a guy from the West, maybe sneaks out and takes Oregon State? Hey, I'm sick of it. Forget this. I don't need this aggravation because these people don't appreciate what I've done. It's going to be interesting to see.
So that's what Dodd said. Obviously, this week, McElwain was asked about it, and he said he's not got any interest in any other kind of job. That's not something he's interested in. And I thought Ryan Young, who covers Florida for SECCountry.com, kind of an interesting take on all of this about would McElwain leave on his own. What Ryan wrote is, McElwain's a competitive guy and a dream job. He worked his whole career to secure. Leaving Florida after 3 seasons, take a lower profile position like the one that Dennis Dodd referenced, would be admitting he couldn't cut it in the SEC. And no matter what fans may think, McElwain certainly doesn't see it that way. So Ryan Young says McElwain would never allow himself to leave Florida on his own. Almost any job is a step down, and McElwain's not taking a step down. Do you agree with Ryan on that?
I don't. And listen, 1% chance for me that Jim McElwain would do that. 1% chance, but there is a chance there for me. And here's what I know about Jim McElwain. He's a little bit of a simpleton. This is a guy from Eastern Washington. You know what I mean? Like he's a guy that's used to the mountains. He's not living.
You don't mean simpleton.
Not simpleton.
You mean simple?
Yeah,
like
he's just a simple
he likes
person.
the simple.
Yeah, I mean, like he's like a calm guy that likes to be, kind of chilled out. And I think that right now he's in the crosshairs. His family's in the crosshairs. And if there's one thing that Jim McElwain loves more than his players, it's his family. And I think that if he feels like that this is becoming a division within his family, then yes, I think he would move on. Like I said, 1% chance.
Yeah.
1% chance. I do agree with the thing that I know that Jim McElwain believes in himself, and he believes that he fits in the SEC, and he knows how to build a championship program. Just has not been able to get it done. And so I think it's fair to start to ask questions about, what were these death threats and who said what, and is there a rift in the athletic department between the administration and Jim McElwain? But I don't think that Jim McElwain's going to remove himself from it. I agree with that point that maybe that's him admitting he's quitting. At some point in the future, yes, maybe he moves on. Maybe he gets tired of all the blowback that he's getting from fans, but I think a very, very small chance.
Charlie Adams in the comment section says, "BA, I'll pay for Mac to fly to Corvallis." So some Florida fans, I guess, had it with McElwain here at this point in time. A slightly opposite point comes from Joel Anthony Dean, who says, "With the way Florida's recruiting, I doubt they fire him." And you're right, the state of the 2018 class for Florida looks pretty good. The 2019 class also in pretty good shape right now as well. Matt Corral, obviously the 5-star quarterback, helps with that. But I'm going to say something I don't have the right to say. This is just me guessing, but that's never stopped me before. McElwain does not have the look of a happy guy.
Yeah,
he doesn't have the sound of a happy guy.
That's very fair.
I mean, whether the death threats happened or not, you don't talk about that kind of stuff in such a public way unless, I mean, there's some sort of negativity would make you even want to bring that public.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think he's happy right now either. I think when you look at SEC head coaches, there's 14 teams. There might be 7 happy ones, 7 sad ones right now. It all depends on what you did the week before. And right now, Florida has not been hot. So maybe he's not happy. And maybe that is something brewing, and it will be something to look at this offseason once we get there. Hey, Jim McElwain really needs to win this year. Similar to the way we felt about Butch Jones probably coming into this season. Jim McElwain needs to do some things. But I'm glad you brought up recruiting because this is a team that's doing a little bit better. I mean, I think they're 11th nationally in recruiting according to 247 right now. Matt Corral coming in. So I think the administration does look at that, and Jim McElwain does look at that and say, you know what, if we can just get this offensive line in the right direction, we've got weapons in the backfield, we've got a lot of youth on the defensive side of the ball, and we have the wide receiver core that can get Matt Corral to the next level. Let me stick around and see if I can make this happen for another year.
Jeff Crawford says Gator administration has buyer's remorse. They have the out they needed with the threat gate, talking about the death threats that McElwain talked about. Matt won't leave on his own. Interesting comment there from Jeff. Let's do item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. We talked earlier in the show about a 2-loss SEC West team still kind of looming on the horizon. That was Auburn. You could say the same thing about LSU. And by the way, I guess as LSU goes into its bye week on Saturday, some of the folks that cover LSU are thinking, what if LSU had actually had a little bit different result this season? Maybe it's a very different conversation about LSU right now. I thought that Alex Hickey, who was with us on Monday here on AT&T SEC Country Live, had an interesting thought about that. Let me show you what he wrote recently at SECCountry.com. He says, though every LSU fan would like to forget the Troy game, that's the one that LSU lost, they shouldn't. It was likely the wake-up call that saved the Tigers from further ruin. The margin really was as narrow as it gets. Is that true from Alex Hickey there, that you don't get the win against Florida, you don't get the win against Auburn, had LSU not gotten the wake-up call of the Troy loss?
Well, it's possible. Here's what I think is the scary part of that, if you are an LSU fan looking at that, is that could be short-lived. If you're kind of pacing this team and Ed Orgeron's tenure so far on losing to Troy or Duke Riley, the Falcons linebacker, coming back and giving you a pep talk, then I think it's a scary future for LSU. I think when you start to look at that team and how they line up in the future, yes, there's some turnover for Ed Orgeron. Yes, he's still building his program in year 2, but you're going to be faced without Darius Geis next year. I think Darrell Williams is also kind of going to be out of there. Arden Key is going to be gone to the NFL draft. So what are you going to have moving forward? Did it take the Troy loss, and do you have to lose another team next year for Ed Orgeron really to have his shtick to these players? I think that's a concerning thing for LSU.
Although you would say the 2007 loss your team suffered, Louisiana Monroe helped your program.
Absolutely. I think that's something that has to happen. I just don't know. I don't know if I'm comfortable moving forward with LSU with Ed Orgeron, because that's like we talked about. This is an LSU team that shouldn't have missed, kind of that thing in between Les Miles. That's why they hired Ed Orgeron. And yet he's a guy who loses to Troy and then gets blown out by Mississippi State.
I think my point on this is bad losses can bring about positive change. Yes. I think it's myth-making to assume that change happened really quickly.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm pointing out. Yes, it can happen over a tenure. Yes, sometimes you need to kind of weed out some of the players when you take over in a tenure, and Ed Orgeron may be doing that. All I'm saying is this is still kind of the same regime that was under Les Miles, so it's not like you had to weed out a bunch of guys. Orgeron was the interim coach last year, and so I think that loss to Troy, and I've said this on this show a bunch of times, I think the mark of a good team is being able to learn lessons without losing a game. And I think that right now that's not how LSU is. I think they still have a tough schedule when you look at the gauntlet they're going to have to play ahead, specifically Alabama next weekend. And we're going to find out a lot about what Ed Orgeron is really bringing to that building.
That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Now, you mentioned Kevin Sumlin earlier. You're trying to put him on the unemployment line. Let's make him the subject of item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. I think that Mississippi State Texas A&M game is going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. Really looking forward to that one. And I think that Kevin Sumlin right now may be looking forward to it as well, because right now, based on some of what Sumlin said to the media this week, he kind of likes the look of his team right now, and he's proud of his staff or how that look has kind of been altered here. Here's what Kevin Sumlin said earlier.
What the staff has done has really simplified things and staying away from the big picture and being focused on really day to day, not week to week, but day to day on here's what you need to get done today. And don't worry about all this other stuff. Don't worry about these things, we're just trying to get better every day, and then every week, and then evaluate after that. So I can tell you we've done a lot of things different this year, and I think our team's in a good place right now.
So he says good place right now. I have a tendency to believe him. I think they deserve some credit. They could have folded the tents after the UCLA game. That was a terrible loss. Did not play well against Nichols. Did not play well against Louisiana Lafayette. But they're winning games right now.
Yeah.
What Sumlin says there does not sound like false bravado. It doesn't sound like coach speak. I think this Texas A&M team is responding at the moment. I think it helps to have a quarterback, Kellen Mond, who probably has his head screwed on a little straighter than some of the other quarterbacks they've had in that program, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that Kevin Sumlin having that freshman quarterback playing, I think it gives his team something to build towards. And let's not forget, too, I mean, when you look at the defensive side of the ball, I think John Chavis is having one of his better years there at Texas A&M. When you look at their defenses of the past,
there's not a lot of candidates for good years.
No, that's my point. That's my point. They're averaging, I think, 60 less yards per game given up. So John Chavis, while still not the juggernaut defensive coordinator we kind of expected him to be in that position, he is having a little bit better year. Now, they still have some games coming up where they're going to have to shut down some teams. And when you look at their schedule, and I mentioned it earlier, Mississippi State, Auburn, New Mexico, Ole Miss, LSU, both those games away at the end of the year. And so I think there is an opportunity for this season to go sideways. This game this weekend, pick them against Mississippi State at home for Texas A&M. So I think that is an interesting line to look at when you talk about those two teams. I'm not saying Kevin Sumlin needs to be fired. I just think that if they have another one of those seasons where it's 8-4 going into the bowl game, it's going to be tough for a lot of Texas A&M fans to swallow.
Especially with the talent level they would appear to have. Jeff Crawford says someone's got momentum. Ignored the first few weeks. They don't look a team in trouble. Terrence Collins says Texas A&M should beat Mississippi State, referencing this Saturday's game. They have a good defense, decent offense. I think that's a tough game to handicap for me right now. I don't really have a strong lean one way or another on Mississippi State, Texas A&M yet.
Neither does Vegas.
I think this is a pretty good game.
It's a pick'em game for Vegas, and you've seen it +1, -1. It's tough because I think you don't really know what you're getting from either one of these teams. You've seen Mississippi State go in and blow out LSU, and then you see them get the brakes beat off them the next couple of weeks against Georgia and Auburn. So it really is a tough game. Texas A&M loses a couple tough games, beats Florida, and then gets beat by a couple touchdowns to Alabama. I don't know. I don't know either. I'm in the middle with you. I think this is a toss-up, and I think that's why Vegas sees it that way.
Item number 9, AT&T SEC Country Live, 1st and 10 list. Lane Kiffin never misses an opportunity. Once again, kind of responding on social media. So a little backstory here. You may remember the EA Sports College Football game. It's been gone now for a number of years, but people still play the old edition. They kind of build new seasons with it. And apparently somebody built the new season with the EA Sports College Football video game and won a national championship with Florida Atlantic. That's Lane Kiffin's team now against Alabama. And Bailey Adams says, I just hope Lane Kiffin is proud of him. And he obviously reached out to Lane at Lane Kiffin on Twitter. Kiffin's response on Twitter, I am proud. You love Kiffin. It's this kind of stuff that keeps him in the news. He's smart about this. I think out of sight is out of mind. I think if you want to get a big job, you got to be constantly in the conversation. And even responding to tweets like this, he just sort of has an intuitive sense for what's going to be picked up virally. I think Kiffin's really good at this kind of stuff.
I mean, he is. And for me, some of his tweets have kind of jumped the shark. I mean, I don't know what's newsworthy and what's not newsworthy. I think the more interesting part of this tweet is to go down and read underneath these tweets. If you're somebody that's looking at Twitter right now and you're reading Lane's tweets, go down and look at how many Tennessee fans are responding to some of these tweets. Bring Lane back. #, bring Lane back.
I mean, did you ever think we would be there?
No,
did you ever think we'd be there?
I saw a tweet yesterday underneath this tweet, and it said, hey, we said some things, you said some things, let's bury the hatchet and bring you on back in Knoxville. And I thought that was so funny. And it's not just the only one. There was a ton of them. There's like 100 tweets from Tennessee people, and I think that's so interesting to look at, and I think that's a storyline. By the way, if you guys that are watching on YouTube right now, I can't figure out how to comment on YouTube right now, but I am following some of y'all's comments on the YouTube.
Thanks for doing that. I appreciate that. Yeah. We got to figure out how to do a better job of saying hello to our YouTube viewers.
Tyler Mann, Prime T, Joe Brummel, we got a bunch of
stuff. Yeah, we'll make sure that we do that, YouTube folks. Sorry if we're not taking good enough care of you. We want to make sure that we show y'all some love as well. But real quick about the Tennessee thing. Tennessee, y'all can do better than Lane Kiffin. I don't mind Kiffin at Missouri. I don't even hate him at Ole Miss.
I feel the same way.
But come on, you can't go crawling back to the girl who did that to you in the past. You can't do that.
I feel the same way about that, the same reason I've been so hard on Butch Jones, because we've talked about this a bunch. We remember Tennessee as that nationally prominent program, and I think the SEC is better for it in the end when you do have a strong Tennessee program. And I think Lane Kiffin is a step back. Bring in, like I said, the proven Power 5 winner. Lane Kiffin to me would be a bust as well. I mean, from the Alabama perspective of myself, I'm like, yeah, bring Lane Kiffin back. But I think as an SEC guy looking at it, it'd be a bad move.
All right, can we talk about something for a minute that has nothing to do with the SEC?
Always.
I find this to be fascinating. It's the subject of item number 10. And like I said, I think this is the first time we've ever had a non-SEC team as a first and 10 subject on the show. But I just think this is just kind of a curious thing. And I don't know if this will ever migrate to the SEC. Maybe it already has, and I don't know. But there was some video that surfaced the other day of 2 Clemson players and this shiny brand new football facility. They're so proud of it. It's got a putt-putt course and everything else. Well, apparently it also has a boxing ring or some sort of apparatus that makes boxing, fight club, MMA, whatever it is, makes it possible. And if you don't believe me, just take a look at this. So here the 2 guys are, and they're going at it. First of all, they can't stay on their feet, but they're going at it. I mean, those look like real punches. Now, Dabo Swinney's kind of asked about this, and he said he doesn't want the football facility to be kind of a frat house, but he's also, a lot of people sort of made light of this and sort of made this to be not that big of a deal. I'm not trying to be a prude here, and I'm not in any way trying to just sort of stir something up. But when I first saw this, I couldn't believe any football program would allow their players to fist fight with each other. That seems like a terrible idea.
Well, they got boxing gloves on. I didn't have a ton of problems with this. I'll be honest with you. And maybe this is because I've been in the locker room. Listen, wrestling was kind of our thing. You can wrestle all you want, so you don't have to throw hands in somebody's face. My biggest problem with this, though, was when the other guy seemingly gets hit in the face and turns around and turns his back to the guy. I mean, he's still throwing haymakers at the back of this guy's head. It's like, let's slip around here. I'm still trying to knock this guy out. And listen, I think this is one of those things when I look at it. There's going to be times, obviously, when you look back at the 60s, there's some things that aren't okay now that were just okay back in the 60s and 70s, right? This is kind of how I feel looking at one of these. I'm only 30 years old, but I look back at my time playing football, especially in high school. We wrestled all the time. I don't know if we boxed. We didn't hit each other in the back of the head, but we wrestled and we roughhoused.
But you would agree that wrestling and roughhousing is different than these guys throwing haymakers. Now, first of all, this is the worst fight I've ever seen. I'm going to Jacksonville this weekend for the Georgia-Florida game. I've seen drunk people in Jacksonville have much better fights than these 2 yahoos who can't even stay on their feet.
I mean, listen, they got boxing gloves on. That's what I'm saying. Wrestling's a big thing.
You can do some damage with boxing gloves on?
Maybe you need to put some headgear on, maybe. But I don't think this is an actual fight. I think they're just having fun with each other. Until the guy turned around and got hit in the back of the head.
Did your dad never tell you everybody's having fun until somebody gets hurt?
That's true. That's definitely
Everybody's laughing until somebody gets hurt. I thought that was kind of a weird thing. All right, we'll do the Champion of Life here in just a moment. Before that, though, let me remind you, AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long, including some of this week's top national games. Let's make those the subject of our AT&T look ahead right now. Of course, the first college football playoff ranking comes out on Tuesday. A lot of these games will have implications there. Wisconsin going to Illinois. Don't expect much of a game there, but you do have a nice slate of games after that. Oklahoma State, West Virginia at noon. And how about this trio of games at 3:30, including obviously the Georgia-Florida game from the SEC. Penn State, Ohio State, TCU against ranked Iowa State. Also beat Oklahoma early in the year. NC State, Notre Dame, which suddenly looks like a much better game. That's a pretty good slate of national games for Saturday.
I can honestly say, if you just showed me those rankings, that TCU Iowa State game before the year started and said that'd be a 4 versus 25, I'd have laughed right in your face. I'd have said there's no way that TCU against Iowa State is a 4 versus 25. There are a lot of interesting games. I mean, Penn State, Ohio State is as big as it gets right now in the Big Ten. Ohio State's still a touchdown favorite with Penn State really rolling, coming in and trying to get that win in the Horseshoe Saturday night. So a lot of storylines to kind of follow nationally, building up to obviously next week's unveiling of the college football playoff.
I don't know when TCU is going to lose. Frankly, I don't really care. They're going to lose somebody. TCU's not going undefeated. I saw their team in the Liberty Bowl last year against Georgia. That's not an undefeated program.
Well, and you and I talked about it on your podcast today, Dog Nation Daily, where TCU, the Big 12 has done this where, hey, let's get the championship game back going. Maybe we can get back in the college football playoff. That might be what really knocks them out this year. If TCU finds a way to make it to the Big 12 championship and has to play Oklahoma again, I don't know if they beat them twice.
I think that's a really good point. By the way, appreciate the plug for Dog Nation Daily, Mike.
That's right. Smooth. I'm learning from you, man.
I tell you what, he's working it here. All right, let's get ready to do our Champion of Life. Of course, much like Tennessee coach Butch Jones is searching for champions of life, we're looking for them here on AT&T SEC Country Live as well. And I have to admit, I'm sort of disappointed in this one a little bit. I mean, is this better than I'm making it out to be? This photo kind of goes viral of the cow in Alabama, and I guess it's like an Auburn fan who even put this out there, but supposedly the Twitter user who takes the picture says it looks like the cow has got the Alabama logo, the A logo, on its side.
Script A? Yeah, I
Does
get it.
that look like the script A to you?
Yeah, a little bit right now. You know, the non-Bama fans, the Auburn people will say that it looks like the Braves logo with a mullet, and I think there's
pretty
something
good.
to be
That's
laughed
pretty
at
good. I
about
like
that
that.
right there. I saw this yesterday, tweeted at Reese Davis, who's obviously a Bama grad, and he didn't get it. He didn't see anything about it. He was just like, yeah, I don't know why I'm retweeting this. Congratulations on your cow. You know, I hope you have a good week.
That just goes to show you it doesn't look that much like an A.
Yeah, no, I agree
mean,
with it.
Listen, I'm all for the viral stuff, but this is like the ink block test. I mean, you got to really want that to look like the Alabama.
I do have to give a shout out right now to Darren Stinchcomb on YouTube. I can't respond to him right now, but he says, hey, Mike, ask BA if he hates the Gators.
Listen. I'll show you right now.
Listen, if you didn't know that by now, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this guy, he tries to be as in between as he can, but he's got, look at him. Look at him right now. That was also a plug, by the way.
That's my Gator Hater t-shirt right there. You can't hear me because my microphone's covered up, but that's my Gator Hater t-shirt right there. Yeah, so that's all you need to know about that. Hey, thanks for being with us on AT&T SEC Country Live today. Mike Johnson's going to miss us tomorrow, but he'll be back again on Monday. Let me pull this down so people can hear what I'm saying. Mike will be back on Monday. I'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Listen to the podcast on iTunes. Subscribe to it there. Give us a rating and review. Share the show with your friends on Facebook. We'll see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. on YouTube and on Facebook Live. Y'all have a great day.